When did you find out that someone in your family was evil? Story 1. I had an aunt, my mother's sister, Beth. She was mean as a snake. Not in a physical way, but in a domineering my way or the highway kind of manner. For some reason, she never liked me. I'm sure it was something stupid I said when I was 6 or 7, but it really was so obvious that even my immediate family would wonder what I had ever done to her. But then again, she loved to take swipes at everyone and everybody if they weren't living life or saying things in precise accordance with the way Beth thought it should be. Essentially, the self-appointed dowager of the family was determined to dictate to everyone how they should live their lives. Beth was married to her poor husband, and no occasion with those two was ever complete without her giving him a full-blown tongue lashing for something trivial. When he died, there was no funeral, no nothing. She just took his ashes and dumped them in the sea. Beth used to go on vacations by herself all over the world. We just took it for granted that her husband didn't want to go, until, that is, her husband died. As it turns out, Beth had something like a 30-year affair with someone, a guy who was always her traveling companion. When my uncle died, this guy was over the moon because now Beth was newly single, only he didn't realize that Beth had a different guy waiting in the wings. I won't go into all the things she did and said, but she had 2 kids. Her son was essayed by a next-door neighbor when he was a kid. Beth knew about it and did nothing. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But she sure liked to talk about her son. That kid's messed up to this day, and she continued with her son's children. She would just talk about what idiots she thought they were. One grandson got so tired of it, he literally married an Australian girl, moved there, and has never been back. Meanwhile, at my other cousin's 65th birthday party, Beth thought it would be nice to tell an adorable anecdote about how my cousin was a nice little rule follower. She proceeded to tell the story about how she absolutely forbade my cousin, when walking home from school, from crossing the street if there was no crossing guard. One day, the crossing guard did not show up for work, so my cousin stood petrified at the curb for 2 solid hours, until my aunt realized her daughter had not come home from school. While Beth thought she was telling a story about her daughter, in truth, she was telling a story about herself. So yeah, no bank robberies, no torturing kittens or anything like that. Instead, a steady, relentless savaging of anyone near and dear to her in life. Not a reflective bone in her body either, or else at some point, she might have thought of the damage she was doing. Narcissists, man. There's a lot of scummy people out there, but narcissists get a free pass way too often. Story 2. My in-laws went behind our back to our wedding caterer and changed the head count from 150 down to 90 to get a discounted rate, and pocketed the refund cash. My parents were the ones that paid the caterers in the first place, so my in-laws were essentially stealing from my parents. They then proceeded to take half the food and hide it in their car before the reception, leaving us with enough food for about 50 people. We had at least 150. I didn't eat at my own wedding reception. Story 3. When I was 9 years old, my mother sent me on an airplane alone to live with my father on a wretched island in South America. I contracted a skin infection that spread everywhere below my waist called impetigo. My father wanted to get back at my mother for leaving him, so he told me that it was mosquito bites and not to worry. When the infection had progressed and completely covered my legs with sores, I was unable to walk to the clinic. I was forced to suffer, immobilized, while lines of ants ate scabs from my legs for a little over a month. A homeless man was snooping near the house and criticized my father and had the church send a nun to bring me to the clinic, where they said it was the worst common infection they had ever seen and was easily treated with antibiotics. The worst part of the story is that my father's cousin was a doctor who lived about 10 minutes away in the village, which I found out years later from my mother, who had taken me to his cousin when I was a baby for the exact same issue. Story 4. I remember when me and my brother were young and were staying at my aunt's house, and my brother got thirsty. He went to get something to drink and called up to my aunt to inform her that there was a thick layer of mold floating on the surface of the grape juice she had in the fridge. You know what she said? She told him to pour off the mold and drink what was underneath. Then, of course, there was the pan of ribs incident. She had a get-together at her house and cooked for it. Me and my brother were hungry, so me and him went into the kitchen to get some ribs, which were in an aluminum pan in the oven. Well, we opened the door, and despite the broken light, we were sure we saw something moving inside the pan. So we called our mom. She pulled out the oven rack to get a better look, and the ribs were swarming with roaches. You couldn't see nary a rib, or even much sauce. There were so many roaches in the pan. There was a similar toy-spoiled burgers incident, and so many more that I could talk about. God, when I hear stories like this, my immediate thought is of this exact thing right here. You know what that is? It's a pile of tea bags. Yeah. Not sure how people can live like that, but apparently they do. Story 5. My dad has a story about one of the kids he grew up with showing up to school with a broken arm and just generally beat to hell. A few days later, when he and this kid were playing and my grandpa called them inside, he pulled the kid into a room with several other dads from town and sent my father to his room. The next Sunday morning at church, the kid's dad came in with 2 broken arms and also beat to hell. Grandpa never said what went down, but it's pretty clear he and a few other men decided to go teach that guy a lesson. I love that. We hear too many stories of men like this kid's father, and not enough like the grandpa and this ramshackle council of neighborhood dads. Story 6. When he purposely excluded his 4-year-old son from a previous relationship, from his wedding to his new spouse, deleted all photos of his son from his social media, and legally signed away all parental rights. He has since had 2 more kids with said new spouse. Story 7. My uncle and my cousin passed away in a car accident. Families sued the trucking company that hit them, and everyone argued about who should get more. I stayed out of it and refused to participate in any bit of it. But these greedy assholes cut my uncle's own kids out because they weren't blood related and he wasn't with their mother anymore. He had raised them both from babies. We call them our cousins. They've been to every Christmas, Thanksgiving, and every other family gathering, including the family vacations. Then their dad dies, and there's a payout, and all of a sudden, they're nobodies. It absolutely disgusts me. I haven't attended a family function since, and that was about 4 years ago. This sort of thing seems to happen all too often. I knew a girl whose grandmother had some land, and her aunt, that basically leeched off her for the last few years of her grandma's life, kicked things off at the funeral by changing the plans from what grandma had asked for to something that suited herself instead. And then she proceeded to insist that she helped out the most and deserves the land and bulk of whatever money was left over, when, in reality, this girl's dad, the son, was consistently driving about an hour up from town to help his mom out while his sister sat on her rear end in grandma's own house, because she knew that asking her daughter would only lead to a headache. This girl's dad got nothing, but he still bought this woman her favorite whiskey to pour over her grave as a last farewell, and he was the only one in the family to do anything like that to honor her memory. People really can be just horrible. Story 8. This reminded me of my uncle. I swear, he's a pathological liar and the closest thing to being a psychopath in our family. Here's some notable actions from him. He would pretend to leave for work, but instead be hiding around the corner waiting for his wife to drop off money to pay the bills. After she took off, he'd go to the mailbox and steal the money. Eventually, their lights and water were cut off. Stole my dad's rifle, which his best friend who had recently passed from cancer gifted him, and pawned it. My parents found it in a pawn shop, and my dad was livid. Uncle lied over and over again about it, and they almost got into a fist fight, which my grandpa had to break up. When his daughter turned 18, he took out credit cards in her name, maxed them out, never paid the bill, and left her in immense debt. He was also a youth pastor, and gathered a large following and was very popular. He began stealing money from the church he worked at. When the church officials approached him, he decided to leave the church and take his followers with him. He was basically a cult leader. Around half the church went with my uncle, where he took donations for mission trips, but pocketed the money. Also, in that same vein, one of his daughters during a Bible camping trip saw him entering the tent of a female miner and staying in the tent overnight. Eventually, he abandoned his following without notice and moved. Really though, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There was a ton of other things as well. He was also a very charismatic guy, and if you'd met him, you'd probably like him. That's the spooky thing about him though, is he provides a false sense of security. Story 9. I lost my grandfather last year. Cancer. He left his estate to me and another family member. My parents are contesting it. They had a f***ing lawyer ready not even 24 hours after he was dead. I have to go to court and face my own parents. The same parents that wished him dead, and wouldn't go see him when he was deteriorating from cancer. I already lost my grandfather, and now I'm going to lose my parents because money is more important to them than their own son. Holy shit, dude. I cannot believe that there are people this horrible walking around. Honestly, the more I read these stories, the more I'm thinking of kids I knew whose parents could very well have been just like this, and maybe that's why these kids were the way they were. Story 10. My uncle was dying, like days away. I was spending almost every waking moment with him. My cousin, the oldest of his 2 sons, comes in and says, "Hey Dad, I was looking at the Best Buy credit card application and it says that if the credit card holder dies with a balance, the issuer will forgive the loan. Can you sign this for me?" The look of disappointment in my uncle's face was heartbreaking. His only response was, "No one will profit from my death." That really cemented my uncle as the best and my cousin as the worst in my eyes. From here we hop into a short rapid fire segment. I'm not going to do my normal upbeat piece here because, well, it just doesn't seem appropriate given the context. So here we go. When they ripped apart 3 generations of family almost immediately after my dad died for a measly $37,000. He's a millionaire. That kind of money is pocket change to him. My sister sent my nudes to everyone in the family, all because I didn't text her back in time. When my dad tried to throw my 6-month-old sister when he was drunk, that man is a monster in disguise. When my uncle took my nose, it's been years and I still haven't gotten it back. Hopefully the little bit of humor in that last rapid fire helped lighten the mood a little bit for you guys. I don't want you going about your days all dreary from hearing stories from people's childhood traumas. But I do feel that stuff like this is important to talk about from time to time, as we never really know what someone's going through. I did leave out a lot of stories in this video just because there was some pretty extreme stuff, but the original posts are linked in the description if you want to read them for yourself. As always, don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I'm ReddList. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time.